Okay, we are in session now. Well, welcome everyone. Happy New Year. Apologies for doing this on Zoom, but it's richer than a phone call, and not as rich as being there in person. But well, we hope to make this a can I say a rich exchange on a topic that's very dear to us. My name is Nick Sana. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the CEO of a software company called Risklands. Like you can see, the logo in our office, and it's a cybersecurity company in Northern Virginia. And I will be your MC today. And we have a very rich agenda that you can see here on the screen. We'll start with a spiritual reflection, a share of an experience of Project Lucha that is happening in New York. We'll then move on to a free sharing of experience among the members of this call, a presentation of a whole new initiative called Economy of Francesco that Elizabeth Garlow will tell us about, and we'll end up with a presentation of an upcoming meeting that the EOC will sponsor and will be part of called the Hearth of a Human Family. And so to get started here, just a little bit on my involvement of the ESC. As a college student, I used to hate business. I wanted to change the world, and I couldn't figure out how to do the two in one until I met a few of the folks of the EOC, and I learned that these two things didn't have to be in contrast with one another. You could change the world, through the business, and the business could be a force for good. And I discovered that we didn't have to go too far to do good in everyday life, and that we can make a difference with how we treat our customers and our employees and the people in our community while running a business. And I also discovered the EOC as a model of inclusive capitalism, where businesses care about the communities around them and can help people in need, and help a society where we can treat one another, and become a society where we can treat one another as brothers and sisters. And so I also want to reflect on the moment we're in time in the year. We're preparing to celebrate Martin Luther King Day this coming Monday. And I feel that it's very fitting to remember Dr. King's message on economic justice as his view of two Americas, in terms of social injustice, but also economic injustice, is unfortunately still true in our days. I now will quote Dr. King, and he said in one of his late speeches, there are literally two Americas. Every city in our country has this kind of dualism, the schizophrenia, split at so many points. And so every city ends up being two cities rather than one. There are two Americas. One America is beautiful situations. In this America, millions of people have the milk of prosperity and the honey of equality flowing before them. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have found food and material necessities for their bodies, culture and education for their minds, freedom and human dignity for their spirits. In this America, children grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But there's another America, and this other America has a daily ugliness about it that transforms a brilliancy of hope into the fatigue of despair. In this other America, thousands of people walk the streets and search for jobs that do not exist for them. In this other America, millions of people are forced to live in depressing housing conditions and do not have access to adequate education. Economic justice, King went on, requires a land where man will not take necessities to give luxuries to the few, and where all our gifts and resources are held not for ourselves alone, but as instruments of service for the rest of humanity. So I thought, this holiday to be very fitting with what we'll talk today. And I'm now very pleased to introduce to you John Mundell, who will lead us into a brief reflection that speaks to the choice of many to live, as my friend Tom Rowley would say, live simpler lives so that many others can simply live. With that, John? Johnny, you're muted.
Thanks, Nick. Can you see my screen? Yeah, oops, got the wrong one. Sorry about that. Let me just do that. Are we good?
Yes.
We're good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Mundell. I'm a president and CEO of Mundell and Associates. We're a small environmental consulting company in Indianapolis. And my wife, Julie, and I became involved in the economy of communion, well, really since its beginning in some ways, because that first evening when we heard about the founders, Chiara Lubich, visiting Brazil and having this experience of witnessing the stark realities or the differences between the rich and poor in Brazil, and the needs of our own community down there, that this idea of the economy of communion was born, in which at the core of it was really this desire to try to solve poverty and indigence in our own community. And so when Julie and I first heard about this new idea, we thought, wow, this is great. Who's going to do this? This is a game changer, right? This is something that can change the world. And it took us a few years, but we finally joined and started our own company. But at the core of this was this idea of economic justice and this desire to come up with a way of helping the poor and those in need. So anyway, today we're going to do a little reflection. I borrowed a little bit of this from some thoughts from Tess and Francis Ganzon, who are former owners of a Philippine rural bank called Banco Cabanyan. And they want to talk about this idea of a new paradigm of economic behavior, which goes beyond just the enterprise, just beyond the business. And so I'll go ahead and kind of start this a little, they give it a little introduction. When we speak of the economy of communion, we think not only of the enterprise, but of a new revolutionary vision, which involves our entire relationships with goods, from consumption to savings, from the macroeconomic dimension to the to the economy of the family or of a civil community. An economy that is inclusive, communitarian, and which has at its basis the culture of giving, the culture of communion. And Tess and Francis go on to provide a quote from Luigino Bruni, who's a Christian economist, and he's also the director of the International Economy of Communion. And Luigino talks about two types of poverty. And so I want to kind of open this up with the quotes that he has about these two types of poverty. There is that kind of negative poverty which can be described as indigence, that brings with it misery, the lack of the most basic needs so as to live a life worthy of human beings. It is a poverty that we must continuously strive to oppose at all levels, personal and institutional, because it lacks the dignity of the human person and cannot make anyone happy and fully human. And yet there is the poverty as the gospel speaks of. The good news is preached to the poor in Matthew. The poor are called blessed in Luke. And in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, there's a beautiful expression in reference to Jesus. He became poor, although he was rich, so that by his poverty, you might become rich. So while one type of poverty is suffered, the other type of poverty is freely chosen, such as what Chiara Lubich, the founders of the Economy of Communion, and her first companions embraced, and which makes a person truly blessed. One important lesson for us today, in whatever we do in the name of helping the ones in need, is to remember that the precondition of defeating the first form of unjust and inhuman poverty is to live chosen poverty ourselves, to choose to be simple and do with less, not for the sake of suffering or being poor per se, but so that we may have something to share. Louis Gino also goes on to say this: in trying to help someone poor, the first assistance to offer is not material goods, but rather the initial cure for poverty is establishing a relationship. That's where the real cure lies, and the experiences of all the years of the economy of communion backs this up. One moves out of poverty when one receives a spirituality or a lifestyle of communion. So I think those are some good thoughts about this idea of how we view poverty, just two types of poverty that exist, and also our approach to perhaps how we involve ourselves in its solution. So I think we have maybe an experience that might be shared at this time. Nick, go ahead, and you want to take the screen back
thank you,
over?
John. No, thank you for leading us into this reflection. Paul, I would like to call Paul Katipan here to the mic. If you can unmute yourself and maybe share with all of us, the experience you've been going through in New York in the last year or so with Project Luce.
Sure. Yeah, so I like what John was saying about how he got involved with the economy of communion. I run also a small company here in New York City, where we do provide system security integration for some of the transportation industry. So we do work a lot with the New York City subway system, the Metro North, Amtrak, and some of the other transportation industry. We provide telecom and security for these agencies. And right from the very beginning, when I started the company 10 years ago, I did abide, and I started abiding on the EOC principles, which for me is the emphasis on relationships. That relationships create an economy. And I think that this has allowed my business to stay in this competitive business. Anyway, so as we work in any industry or any company, you're associated with many people, not only with your employees. You get in contact with your clients, obviously, who you take care of. I have a few clients. You get in contact also with your competitors. I get in contact also with the electrical companies, the suppliers, the vendors, and you create a whole network of relationships. And so I thought of, instead of just running the economy of communion principle by myself, can we involve other companies, And keep in mind, this is New York City again. I said, there's no way other companies would want to do this philanthropic thing. But I thought, why not? If I was interested and many other people are interested, why not? So I approached one of the business owners, and I think she's on this call right now. I saw her name. Her name is Nellie. And so I talked to her and I said, hey, Nellie, I have, I'm running this idea. I mean, the company that I run abides this idea of economy of communion. And I started sharing with her, but I was surprised how well she took it. She says, that's great. And I said, I'd like to launch it to other companies. And she said right away, let's do it. It says, I'll take care of the drinks. Let's have an open discussion and well, let's do it. Then I went to talk to Goldman Sachs, because their headquarters is here. Their world headquarters is here. And I found someone they're managing their lawyers. And she was excited. She told me of all the social projects that they're doing. Lo and behold, I had a whole, the people I talked to, they were all excited, and I said, we could do social projects together. And so 2 years ago, we launched this first meeting. Let me see if I could share my screen. And I'll show you some pictures. Do you see my screen? Yeah. So this is the first meeting that we held in one of my clients' office in Queens here in New York City. And the title of that event was Liberty, Equality, and the question of if we have liberty, freedom, and equality, can we have brotherhoods, fraternity, sisterhood, this whole idea of the three-legged revolution of the French. And on that time, there were about 25 companies that attended, and they were very happy with it. They were excited of this idea of an economy that's inclusive, that is for everyone. So after that, we had a subsequent meeting. This time, it was in Fordham University. And we were able to invite Fadi, our guest speaker. He was he used to be the president of ICANN. ICANN is they are the ones that provides the domain name resolution for the whole internet. And he shared to us his experience of how he tried to build this relationship, this unity throughout the whole internet atmosphere. He shared to us even the experience of dealing with China and Brazil when there was that rift that they wanted to create their own internet. And also the political world, I mean the scholar world came in there too. Some of the students, they were excited to hear this. So wow, this is something that's great. And then a few months later, I was invited to speak at the United Nations at that year, that was 2019, the United Nations was looking at the inequality, the big difference, that's the gap between the rich and the poor. So that was the Economic Social Development Forum of that year. And they invited me to speak about the private sector. What can the private sector do to gap this rich and the poor? So on that occasion, I spoke of what the experience of the economy of communion is doing all over the world, how in our own efforts, we are bridging this gap, because again, it's of a relationship. If I see that the other people are my brothers and my sisters, it's inherent to me, it's automatic of me we'll find ways that we could collaborate and help each other. It's not social assistance, it's just natural of us to help each other. If you remember also that year, there was about 200 CEOs, the big CEOs of the United States. They gathered here in New York to declare a statement saying that our purpose is not anymore so much as the profit, because in any of these big corporations, you know, there's always this bad connotation that the company is always just for profit. It is, but there's a trend to say that it's not enough that the profit, that we need to look at the overall holistic view of a business. And so all of this to say that there is this trend or this innate desire that businesses can do something much better than just generate profits. And so I remember when I approached Nelly, I says, we could have companies, why can't we do something together, right? Different diverse sectors of companies. I work more in the engineering companies, but we could put together other companies to work on common projects. So like a couple of this that I'm showing here, the one on the left side, this is a march promoted by the Muslim mosque here. And every year they do a march to promote, to create an awareness that jail is not good. So with the employees of my company, we went and marched alongside with them. And I approached a couple of other business owners. And one business owner who is Jewish says, I cannot march, but here, I'm gonna make a donation to that Muslim mosque. You know, another company, the business owner is a Christian, but he says, I'll help you by again donating some funds to that march. So you know, these are private companies, and this is a Jewish owner giving money to Harlem that's run by the Muslims. So this is the implications are just more than what I thought it would be. The one in the middle, that's the one in Brooklyn. There we collaborated with a nonprofit organization called New York Cares. And we went there to paint a high school in Brooklyn. And then the one on the right side, this is the one last March or April, I think, yeah, last April, where one of my clients, instead of producing these electronic components for the subway, they started building the ventilators since we needed ventilators here in New York. So again, with a few of my employees and some of our friends, some of the other businesses, we came and helped out by putting wires, putting screws. Again, to see that there is this possibility of working together for the whole community. So having said this, something came about to put some more of a structure behind this, so that this doesn't just become one of, that it becomes also organized. So we came out with a group called Project Luce. Project Luce is an expression of the economy of communion here in New York City. Because as you can see, our mission statement and what we do is very much similar to the economy of communion. But we looked at among ourselves, what concretely can we do here in New York City? So for us, our mission statement is to establish a platform for people and businesses to foster unity, for diversity, mobilizing the positive aspects in our society. So what to do what? So again, these are the things that we've seen already started to develop a space to encourage and nurture relationships, to avoid isolation. Wouldn't that be great to avoid isolation and to inspire to creativity and action? To do corporate social responsibility. This is big in businesses where each businesses are doing philanthropic things already for the community. But can we have all these other businesses working together to build a new prophetic economy of inclusion instead of the culture of exclusion, a culture of we instead of a culture of I, and obviously to help the marginalized in our community, and to bring out the inherent good to work on a common project, which will be determined by each of the communities. So these are some of the things that we wanted to base our actions. And this is the committee that was came about. The picture on the top is when we met with Jesus Moran last year in January. Jesus is the president of the Focolare, where the economy of communion started. And it was we told him our dreams, our visions, our dreams. And he shared with us, of course, he encouraged us. He was happy to hear this, but he encouraged us to also to remember that we're not alone on this effort. As this, like for example, in this meeting that we're having today, there are many initiatives that are happening. He shared to us, for example, the initiatives that happened in Brazil. It's a small initiative to help out the poor people in the shanty towns, which now has become wide and huge, and they're serving so many people. And we says, okay, see, we always start from something small, and we don't know where it's going to take us. The picture on the right side is one of our organizing meetings when we get together, and here we were deciding on what to do this year. Of course, right after this, COVID came in and kind of changed all our vision. But I think it's just a momentary pause. And as soon as things clears up again, we are planning on going ahead with our initiatives. And also in light of what happened last year, we wanted to include in our mission statement to also include racial diversity in the workplace, because that is certainly one of the hindrance that blocks this reciprocity and communion with relationship with everyone. So that, in a nutshell, is what the Project Luce is going for here in New York City. Thank you. Nick, back to you.
Thank you, Paul. I see a lot of applause, virtual applause here, can I say, behind the mute buttons here. So thank you so much, Yeah, very fittingly with your name, you guys are a luminous example of what the EOC can do on the ground, in cities like New York. And for those who don't know, Pollen is a business. It's a very successful business, actually a very highly profitable business that doesn't just stop there, but decides to use their talents, their means, their time, and the many gifts they have for the benefit of the wider community and get more people involved so that we can have a multiplying effect on society. So thank you, Paul, again. Now we, moving ahead in our schedule, would like to open the forum for a little bit of sharing, because one of the benefits we've seen over the year in the EOC is to help one another in a journey. And one of the instruments of help is also sharing, experiences, of the good and the bad. What happened when we, try to put the spirit into practice? So what difference does it make? And so we're going to open the mic. I may just to warm up and have people think about maybe an experience that we want to share. I can share about a couple of moments where we're reflecting in our company, how we tried to live the EOC spirit, last year. And I can very briefly think about two moments. The first one is when COVID hit, we found ourselves immediately eligible for the PPE loans. The government was making, to many companies, funds available to make sure that we could meet payroll even during an economic downturn. And I have to say, we got hit by the ensuing crisis, but we had enough money in reserve to the point where, after qualifying for everything and having the loan, form filled and just being ready to send, we paused for another moment and realized that many other businesses were not getting loans because, the money that was allocated, was fully consumed. And we felt that other businesses needed the money more than us. And so we decided to hold it form. I called the board, told them that we did not feel good about taking the money because other businesses needed more than us. So that's just one example where we try to live the EOC spirit. Another one is that because of a young workforce, we got a lot of pregnancies last year, a lot of babies, in the wider risk ones family. So that's a good news. We also got some chronic, diseases in the families, and that led to a 54% increase in our healthcare premiums. Huge bill. So on one side, the joy of helping people with our healthcare, services, and the fact that we're paying for the families fully for the healthcare that we provide through insurance, and suddenly we get footed this big bill, and that was a moment of truth. Do we focus on the bottom line here because we need to take care of the business, or or what? And we looked at our culture code statement. The number one statement says put the other first. And after looking at that, we made a decision in 2 minutes as like this: if we're going to work harder, we're going to find other ways of savings in the company. And as for me, I also made a prayer to the good Lord and saying, listen, we're going to do this for our people. Don't leave us hanging here. Do your part as well in helping our business. And we took care of the premium, didn't put the burden to the families or diminish the benefits they could get. And there was a moment where not only we built culture, but we felt really we're living the EOC spirit. So small little experiences of how we can change the world where we are. We don't have to go far away to find opportunities to live relationships and fraternity in business. So any other experiences? Open mic here. You can unmute yourself and share if you have any other experiences, across, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to live the EOC spirit, this lifestyle.
And Nick, I wanted to share something that just happened to me also actually this morning. Talking about poverty and chosen poverty. It reminds me because here in New York City, there's so much the disparate between the rich and the poor. One of my first clients I remember was Keton. The Keton is a clothing company where the suits are at least $5,000. And then another client of mine was the Maori shoes, where the shoes, their alligator shoes, are $2,000, right? And so you see opulence, and yet you see so much poverty, and so it's always a choice, and to see what is really right and what is not, what is unfair. And so this morning here, we live here in Harlem, and we've been helping out. We met this homeless lady that we've been helping out. We help her out, but she usually refuses any of our help, because but sometimes we've given her blankets and things like that. But this morning, she in talking to her, it was the first time that she asked us, "Hey, can you buy me coffee and muffins from McDonald's?" And I was happy to hear that, because there was, she was asking, and so I said, "Sure, absolutely, we'll buy it for you." But she says, "Okay, here's the money." All right, so, and right away she says, "No, I'll take care of it, don't worry, I could." But she says, "No. I said, "Let me get it." So then I went to get it. And she said, "It's going to be $10 because I want 2 muffins and 2 coffee. And there's a special in McDonald's right now. So you could get that, and it's $10. So I got it, and I was happy to give it to her. And again, she wanted to give me the money. So I thought about it, and I said, "Okay, I'll take $1. Right? So, and she gave me the $1. And that, to me, I think, is the spirit of the economy of communion. It's not like we're helping the poor and that we're always superior. To me, it was a way of relationship that she could give back. So for her to be able to give that dollar back, and for me to accept it, allowed me to be grateful to her. Also, not only that, allowing me to help her, but allowing her to give back. I don't know how it is, but I mean, to say, it would be easier for me to say, "Don't worry, I got this covered." But I think in terms of choosing the relationship and in this poverty of hers, to allow her to give back in what she can give. And it makes me think also of in the way of we're in an economy of communion, that we allow people to help us in their poverty, to give us that richness. So that was just an experience that I had this morning that I thought I could share at this forum.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else?
Anyone's not jumping in, I've just a small experience too, but it'll just be very short. Over the years, we've employed a lot of people who were in need in our business in some form or another. Recently, in the last 3 weeks, we've employed an out-of-work painter to start painting our building. He used to have a business. He had a lot of family problems, and so really over the last 3 weeks, we've gotten to know him as he's been painting our building. We noticed it was getting cold out. He didn't have a coat. We found some, extra coats and hats, and he needed a place to park his motorcycle that he still had. Anyway, the beautiful thing is just developing the relationship and getting to know Rocky, and finding out that he's really contributing to helping our building. We've needed it painted for some time, and we've gotten to know him. And instead of just paying him, he was using a kind of loan sharks to make, to take loans and paying 20% interest. So we helped him start a bank account and gave him some money to get that going. And he was really appreciative of that, but also recognizing it's a two-way street. He's got to continue to work and show up and all that. So it's been a real strong experience.
Well, thank you, John.
I have to say that I have a couple of really very simple experiences as well, but especially since COVID has happened and so many people are unemployed. I retired a few years back, and my role in the economy of communion has really changed a lot, obviously, but I still have a role. And since COVID, I have to say that both Joanne and I have come to an agreement that that we would utilize local people to do various jobs for us, jobs that I would normally do on my own. You know, for example, cut my grass. So we now have a local person who now has supplementing his income, you know, through taking care of my yard. I feel a little lazy about it, but you know, hey, yeah, that's okay too. Get more time for reading. There's a fireman in our area, a volunteer fireman who did Christmas lights, and so we hired him to do Christmas lights on our home. Probably you know, we got this COVID relief that, again, as many of you have already experienced, we didn't really need, you know, so we became aware of a young lady who had a malfunctioning iPhone, and so and didn't have enough money to purchase another one. So we were able to help her purchase a new iPhone. Well, not new, an iPhone 11, and it was, you know, I mean, that's out of date already, but you know, whatever. But again, it's the idea that we just did a meditation on Fratelli Tutti, and you know, and the Holy Father talks about, you know, the fact that there are many people think that he's against capitalism, and that capitalism, and it's actually the opposite of that. That he really applauds the ownership of property, but you know, in the ownership of property, what do we do with that? You know, and so. It's the idea that we make available the things that we have to the people who have a need. And so as a retired person, that would be actually in part my role in the economy of communion. And I just want to have to tell you that I am absolutely thrilled that 49 people are on this call. I can remember our early EOC calls, and we'd have 6 people, and we'd be sharing, and it'd be wonderful and everything else. But to have this kind of interest at this point is just great. It's so good to see all of you now. So,
Tom, thank you. Thank you for being one of the pioneers here in North America. And these little experiences, like all the ones I heard before, help bridge those divides between these two Americas we heard before, you know, one relationship at a time. And so thank you. One last one, maybe a brief one, if somebody wants to talk or share. Otherwise, we'll move ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, this
Marie?
is short. Yes, this is very short. I teach high school now. It's something I did after many years in industry. And when I first started teaching, my salary took a huge dip. And it was so low compared to what I was making in industry that I put myself on a 10-month payment plan instead of a 12-month plan. So I would save up a lot just to get through the summer. And usually I'm like counting the pennies to get through August. And this year, for the first time, because my salary is finally reaching close to the top of teaching salary, and I'm literally making more than twice that I made when I started. It's just the way our curve goes. And last summer, I looked at the amount I had put away in late August, and I said, you know, I didn't use any of my savings this year. And I thought, so many people are unemployed, and I'm grateful to have a job. So I knew of the fund that they had put aside to help families in need or unemployed, and I wrote a nice fat check for half of the money I had put aside. And I thought, this is good. I can at least help that. And a day or two later, I'm pulling out of my driveway, and I nicked the side of my bumper on the rock wall in my driveway. And it just kind of pulled the plastic bumper a little out of line. And I thought, oh, you know, I'll go to the body shop. This is a cheap fix. Turned out it wasn't a cheap fix. And it took the other half of the money I had saved. And I thought, you know, God's trying to tell me something here. But I was so glad I had put aside half, you know, and I said, you know, God took care of me anyway in this. I still made it through the summer. I still had the money I put aside, and I still was able to help somebody. And I thought, this is, it was God trying to say, don't worry, don't rely on it. So I thought that's how I have to live, you know, don't worry. So.
Beautiful. Thank you for trusting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Beautiful. We now have to move to our next agenda item. Thank you, Marie, again. And I will pass the baton to Elizabeth Garlow, who until recently was part of the EOC Commission in North America and is now working on a project called the Economy of Francesco, of which the EOC is one of the sponsors and animators. And so many of you may not have heard of Economy of Francesco. If you heard, probably you're still curious to find out what it really is and what it means and what we're doing about it here in North America. With that, Elizabeth.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, and I, as of 2 weeks ago, live back in Detroit, Michigan. And I'm excited to share a little bit with you about this initiative that actually was an outgrowth of a meeting that Pope Francis held with many members of the Economy of Communion in February of 2017, where he met with members of commissions from all around the world to essentially share his enthusiasm for the Economy of Communion and also invite us into a space of deeper reflection about how we could not just tweak around the margins of our current economic system, but fundamentally shift it in a direction where we are truly inclusive and participatory in building a new economy. So this initiative is pretty new. It's about a year in the making. And it really kicked off with a letter that Pope Francis shared with young people around the world in May of 2019, where he invited young people to enter into a covenant to change today's economy and to give a soul to the economy of tomorrow. So those were his words in a letter that he shared, and I'll drop a link to that letter in the chat after we're done here, because it's actually a beautiful meditation on its own. I was thinking of reading part of that text to you today, but in the interest of time, I think I'll share that link with you so you can sit with it. But in essence, as we know, Pope Francis has really invited us to contemplate the deep interconnectedness of all of us and all of us with creation, and has kind of invited us to contemplate how we are caring for our common home. And as part of that, we have to examine the ways that our current economic system and the ways we participate in it are or are not safeguarding our common home. What are the ways that our economic structures and systems might be contributing to the degradation of our environment? What are the ways that we are moving maybe in the direction of living in better harmony with our environment? But these are really defining questions of our time. And so we really felt like this invitation from Pope Francis was speaking to some of the questions that myself and many peers have been really wrestling with as young professionals, as students of economics, as people who are interested in business, investing in economics. And those questions have a lot to do with the inequality that we've spoken about a lot on today's call, whether it's kind of personal experiences of seeing the haves and the have-nots, the ways that this pandemic has actually exacerbated inequality in our society. And we see what we are calling a Y-shaped recovery, where some are actually doing better because of the current circumstances, and many are doing worse. Many have lost their livelihoods. Many are struggling with an inadequate social safety net that isn't really catching them in the midst of tremendous job loss and increasing costs of living. So this inequality born of this kind of current economic system is something that many people are trying to re-examine and think about how we can address. Similarly, climate change and the ways in which more and more extreme weather events are impacting our global human family is a question that many people are really wrestling with too, and the implications of that as people might eventually be displaced from their homes. So there were a number of us that were actually gathering starting about 2 months before Pope Francis shared this letter to reflect on Catholic social thought and economics. We were just gathering informally on Zoom just to share some of these ideas and questions and reflect together. And then when Pope Francis's letter landed, we thought, wow, this is really speaking to us in such a deep and resonant way. How can we take up this call to essentially step into a new movement that Pope Francis was seeking to catalyze, that would be led by young people, that would be really not afraid of taking on these kind of structural and systems questions. So Pope Francis had initially invited young people to come to Assisi, Italy. The original dates were March 26th and 28th of 2020. And as we know, that changed because of COVID. And so we actually did hold a global Zoom call, more or less, you can believe it. There's 50 of us here. I think we were a few thousand on a big online event that took place November 19th through 21st. But what I wanted to share too is that while the global event really has helped catalyze a tremendous conversation with different leaders around the globe, the Economy of Francesco has also invited different regions around the world to establish hubs of activity. And so we thought, well, why don't we really use this opportunity to start to convene people here in North America who are hungry for a conversation about the ways that our Catholic lineage, Catholic social thought, and these kind of various interests we have in business entrepreneurship and economics, where are those things converging, and how can we create a space to mutually enrich one another with what we're wrestling with and different ideas we have moving forward. So in December of 2019, we convened our first call. We just sort of put an invitation out there and said, this is a letter that Pope Francis has shared with young people around the world. We're just interested in hosting a conversation that kind of looks at these questions in the context of our North American society. And we had 200 people sign on. And so we realized, well, there's a real hunger here to have this kind of conversation. So since then, we've been convening these conversations on more or less a quarterly basis. Many people on today's call have probably participated in those. And it's a diverse audience of economists, of community organizers and activists, investors, people who are examining this broader question of how does our Catholic lineage and faith, and in particular, the life and example and teaching of Pope Francis help inform our future economy. So we're looking to create these spaces for idea dissemination, for shared collaborations, and see where it could go. And we've had some interesting things come up in the process that I wanted to share. One is that we've started to map an ecosystem of different initiatives around North America that we see are starting to gel into actual, what we might call new economy demonstration projects. So for example, we have a cluster of individuals in South Bend, Indiana, that have been helping spearhead an initiative to use parishes around the country to create new community banking infrastructure to try and reach low-income communities. We have a number of people in the world of academia who are re-examining their business and education curriculum and are trying to use Catholic social thought to inform how that curriculum could be revised and revisited in the context of today's realities. So at Fordham University, there's a professor by the name of Michael Pearson, who's been working closely with Jeffrey Sachs, who was an economist that helped get behind this Economy of Francesco effort early on. And they're planning to roll out a new curriculum starting this spring for undergraduate students. And so we've had some dialogue with them as well about how this new curriculum could not just be made available to university students, but potentially be made accessible to a broader audience through smaller modules. Some other things that have come about from this is we've hosted smaller group workshops. So over the course of 2020, we held 3 workshops that would invite people into a more kind of intensive 4-week experience where they would have space for peer learning, for meditation and reflection, and a lot of writing and feedback. So we use For anyone who's interested or familiar with it, we use Seth Godin's alternative MBA model to structure a curriculum where individuals are given prompts to reflect on in writing. They share those their written reflections with each other, get feedback, and then come together to continue to unpack their learning. So we did one workshop on spiritual community building for a new economy. Sorry, we did 2 workshops on that topic. And then we did one workshop on the shared ownership economy. So starting to think about what are these alternative ownership structures like cooperative ownership that might invite people into alternatives for building shared wealth, but not just material wealth, also agency and community, and being able to participate in the decision-making of an enterprise moving forward. So those workshops have been really fruitful and have really started to, I think, generate some interest and momentum in how we can continue to build more structure around this so that it actually can sustain itself moving forward. Right now, there's been a few of us coordinating these in kind of a volunteer capacity. So we're starting to talk with other potential institutional partners to think about where we could take it next. And our first institutional partnership just came about. We're working with the Franciscan Sisters of Mary, which is a religious order out of St. Louis, to put together a workshop for investors starting in February. So I dropped my email in here if anyone is interested or knows accredited investors who would be interested in trying to move their investment portfolios or move their organization's finances in the direction of what we're calling livable futures. That's kind of inspired by the integral ecology of Pope Francis. We're hosting a workshop for those folks in February and March of this year, and we're in the process of accepting applications for that. So if you know anyone who might be interested in that, please do reach out over email and I can share that information with you. So that's all I have on Economy of Francesco. And if there's any time left, we can spend a little bit of time with questions. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I think unfortunately we need to probably leave questions to email because we are running out of time here and we have one more agenda item to cover, but it's super exciting. I wish I was under 35 so I could be part of that energy and all those initiatives that are coming about. So very, very exciting to see that energy. And just one thing, actually, I'm going to take the privilege to ask one question, brief one. You talked about the Catholic lineage and Pope Francis, but this is not just for Catholics, correct?
That's correct. So we're actually finding that the Catholic social teaching and justice framework has a lot of universal applicability and interest for people of other faiths or not faith traditions as well. But we're using that as an anchor just because it is very rich in terms of things that could help shape our thinking on the economy.
Wonderful. Good. Last but not least, in our agenda here, we will be meeting in 2 months in the, can I say, within the framework of an event called A Hearth for a Human Family. DSC will be one of the contributors and one of the sponsors of the event. And we'll have one of the organizers, Amy Ullman, tell us more about the event.
Great. It's wonderful to be with you all. I am a long-time fan of the Economy of Communion, also as really the cutting edge of the dialogue, the conversation about the ideas that have come forth from the Focolare movement. And so I've tried to make every Economy of Communion meeting since I can remember, since I was a law student. And I now teach seminars in law and religion at Georgetown. And am also working with the Focolare community to kind of spearhead our efforts to bring ahead these conversations. So many of you I see on the screen were actually with us at the event that we held last year, right before the pandemic, A Hearth for a Human Family in San Antonio. And the idea behind that is actually very similar to the feel of this call. So bringing together concrete lived experiences of how we try to put these ideas in practice, academics who are reflecting on the impact of the ideas also and how to spread them and share them, and creating an environment where we can really share and learn from each other. So the characteristic of the San Antonio event was these round tables where we brought together people who were reflecting on the desire for a more just world, a world where everyone can flourish. I loved Nick's reflections at the beginning of how all of these problems and challenges are interconnected. The environment, racism, our political challenges, together with economic justice. And so the event will include also reflections from other people working in other fields, media, education, healthcare, journalism, psychology. And like the physical event, there'll be also lots of space for economy of communion grounded workshops and reflections. So it will be on March 6th and 7th, and it'll be online. If you are interested in being involved in preparing a workshop and sharing your ideas, the best connection is however you were initially connected into this call. And there'll be lots of freedom in terms of the design, whatever is most helpful in bringing ahead the reflections that are already so rich in this conversation. The design is intended to be very, very flexible, not just in terms of the workshop space, but also open lunch table space where you can bring in any types of topics that you'd like to convene others to work on. The focus will be the recent letter of Pope Francis, but again, called Fratelli Tutti, on strengthening human relationships, also reflecting on these big picture questions. But again, as Nick said, it's certainly not limited to the Catholic social thought framework. It's really intended for everybody to be able to dive in. And so, so we look forward. I don't just say we look forward to like seeing you there, but to following the lead of the longtime lead of the economy of communion in terms of how to bring concrete life experience together with this paradigm shift that Elizabeth just explained so beautifully, the paradigm shift that has tremendous possibility for also having an impact in lots of areas of our culture. So we look forward to seeing you there in March.
Well, thank you, Amy. If you liked this meeting, you will like the meetings, you know, at the Heart of a Human Family even more. It's going to be more there. And so we're really looking forward to the event. With that, that concludes our program for today. I want to thank everybody for attending. And for those who are, you know, at least in the US, but also in other places, you know, let's make also the remembrance of Dr. King's, you know, holiday and Monday a special moment of reflection, you know, on how we can help in our society, you know, resolve these divides between these different Americas, whether it's US or Canada, you know, that doesn't matter. We have divides there, and how can we help resolve them one relationship at a time. So with that, have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye.
See you, Nick.
Bye. Thank you,
See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Take
Goodbye.
care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.